What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the White and Gold Talk podcast. Joining me after the Cavs' first media availability ahead of the playoffs, Chris Fedor, Jimmy Watkins, cleveland.com's finest. I know we have a rendition of Hey Chris to get into, but as we were talking about it before the show, Jimmy had mentioned that there were a couple of things that piqued his interest from today's practice. So I'm going to just open the floor up. Jimmy, tell me what caught your eye or caught your ear, perked your ears up a little bit in today's practice, and from what we talked about with the guys. Obviously, we talked to Kenny Atkinson, Jarrett Allen, and Evan Mobley today.
Well, I think the first thing that caught the most notable thing I should say that caught my ear today was a comment that Kenny made about Darius. Question was, I think Chris asked this, about like what version of Darius do you need for the Cavs to get where they want to go? And Kenny basically said, I know he's 25 years old, but we need him to be 28, which is like, I thought that was a really, first of all, a really interesting way to frame that. But we just like, this goes back to, it's another reminder, I think, of how drastic a reality change came with the Donovan Mitchell trade. Like, this team just grew up so fast. Or I mean, maybe they didn't in some cases, but they had to. They were forced to. They were graded on a way more mature grading scale as soon as that trade was made. And it's like Darius Garland right now, 25 years old. Evan Mobley, is he going to be 24 in June? Like, if we were grading this team on the organic, small market, slow build scale, like, we'd probably be expecting this year what we were expecting 2 years ago out of the Donovan Mitchell team that flamed out in the Knicks. By the way, fell below expectations. We expected more of that team, but like, win a first round playoff series. That's kind of the timeline that that Darius and Evan are on. But now there's a bona fide superstar around. So like, we've just upped the stakes 2, 3, 4 levels. And I think it's good perspective. It's another reminder of how important of a playoff run this is for Darius's place in the franchise and reputation around the league, frankly. Like, he's had the bounce back season that we were all kind of expecting and fans were hoping. But now it's like, you kind of got to rubber stamp it in the playoffs. And Kenny's saying, like, we need the numbers that he's put, like, if you do what you did in the regular season as a whole in the playoffs, 2 thumbs up. But it's just like, we need you to carry yourself in a different manner, maybe. You know what I mean? Like, the playoffs demand a different level of maturity from you. I think that's one way to look at it. The other way, again, it's perspective. This dude's only 25. You know, he signed the rookie extension, I don't know, the summer before they traded for Darius, or the summer before they traded for Donovan. Like, everything has been fast forwarded to such an intense degree. And I don't know why. I mean, obviously it's in your face every day, right? But Kenny saying that just kind of hit a light bulb for me on that topic right there.
I mean, I think when you talk about the Cavs, guys, you're going to have the same lingering question going into the playoffs until it's finally answered. And it wasn't answered last year, and it wasn't answered the year before that. And it's like, there's no way to speed up the clock of Darius and Evan. There's no way to make them more experienced. There's no way to get them to better understand everything that they're about to face in the playoffs. And you can say the same thing when it comes to Kenny Atkinson. He's coached 5 games in the playoffs as a head coach. Like, there's no way to make it so that he has as many coached games in the playoffs as Eric Spoelstra or Rick Carlisle or Doc Rivers or even Joe Mazzulla, for crying out loud. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's something that we didn't have to talk about as much throughout the course of the regular season, because the regular season wasn't going to answer that question. And oh, by the way, they went 64-18, and they were the best team in the Eastern Conference, and they were the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference from start to finish. But like, this is where those conversations pick up again. Just the level of readiness for Evan Mobley and the responsibility that he has in the role that he's going to have. the level of readiness of Darius Garland and the responsibility that he's going to have and the role that he's going to have. There's just no way to say for sure, yeah, Darius is ready for this. There's just no way to say for sure Evan Mobley is ready for this. Like, you have flashes from last year's Eastern Conference semifinals, especially with Evan. Shoot, game 5, he was one of the best players on the floor. Donovan wasn't there. Jarrett wasn't there. Karis LeVert wasn't there. Kristaps Porzingis wasn't there. But that was a floor that had Drew Holiday, former NBA champion, Jason Tatum, future Hall of Famer, Jaylen Brown, now the Finals MVP. And on that floor in Game 5, Evan Mobley was one of the best players, if not the best player. So that's encouraging from a Cavs standpoint, but that was a one-time thing, right? That was one game that really stood out. Now, he was really, really good in that series specifically, but it's like there's just no way to know for sure if a guy is going to be ready until he does it and he shows you that he's ready. They're the same questions that were surrounding Kyrie Irving when he was here during their finals runs. Is he mature enough? Is he ready for playoff basketball? Is he ready to be a champion? Does he have too many bad habits from early on in his career and stuff like that? And it's funny because, following the Cavs losing in the Eastern Conference semifinals to Boston and, all of the questions surrounding this team and surrounding JB Bickerstaff, I wrote in my postmortem about, a source telling me that there were various points throughout the Cavs playoff run that Donovan Mitchell got frustrated with a lack of maturity that he was seeing. It's not that these guys are doing these nonsensical things. It's just, are they ready to compete for a championship the same way that Max Strus is, the same way that Donovan Mitchell is? And again, like I said, there's just no way to know that going into these playoffs. There's no way to answer that going into these playoffs. They just have to show it. They have to show it for multiple rounds, multiple games.
3 things off of that. One, I think Kenny Atkinson, when he was talking about Darius Garland's maturity, understood that there's a fine line that has to be towed with that, right? Because obviously you need Darius Garland to have the headspace of a mature point guard that's going to be able to navigate a tough defense, whoever they may see. They know that they're going to come at Darius on both ends of the floor and try and take him off his game. But the other portion of that Kenny Atkinson and Jared Allen mentioned is they still need Darius Garland to be him. Don't change.
Mm-hmm.
Be the free-flowing player that you have been all year. Play with the same joy. Play with the same passion. Do not let your emotions get the best of you. And I think that's the biggest portion of that, where you kind of toe the line between the two, because you understand that if Darius is able to still have the same level of productivity, that's one thing. But if he's able to not have the same level of productivity, but still have the same mindset, I think that is already a step in the right direction of maturation and of growth for him, because we've seen that his energy and his mindset and all of those things can be tied to his emotions. And I think that's the biggest thing for Darius Garland, outside of obviously the basketball aspect of it, of being able to put the ball in the basket and not being a liability on the defensive end.
I also think that the Cavs saw things in the second half of the season with Darius. And there were moments, late in games or just in games in general, where teams would get really, really physical with him. They'd pick him up 94 feet. They'd smack him in the face. They'd grab him around the waist. They would do these things to kind of push the envelope. And he just clearly did not like it. And you could tell in his body language that he didn't like it. He would pick up the ball and he would stare toward the bench, or he would pick up the ball and he would stare toward the official. So it's like those kinds of moments, like those are going to happen throughout the course of the playoffs. We talked about one the other night on the podcast with Jalen Suggs, and then Darius like going chest to chest with him and stuff like that. Those things are going to happen from the opening game, whether it's against Miami, whether it's against Atlanta. It might be Dyson Daniels, it might be Davion Mitchell, who knows? But like that's going to happen. And the way that Darius reacted at times in the second half of this season, like it was kind of pouty, and it was kind of like changing his mood and his on-court body language. And I think those are the kinds of things that people saw, including Kenny, that those moments, not a big deal in the regular season, right? but could be the difference between you winning a game or losing a game, especially when you talk about the margin shrinking as these playoffs go on. Like the margin's going to be bigger, obviously, against Atlanta or against Miami, but as the series go on, the margin's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and you just don't want a guy to like develop those kinds of bad habits where, physicality bothers him, pushing and shoving bothers him, grabbing him bothers him, towing the line and crossing the line into what is physicality and what's illegal based on a foul. Like those kinds of things, you just have to understand that that's what comes with it, especially with the role that he has as one of the primary ball handlers. Ask Steph about it. He gets grabbed all the time coming off of screens. Like they were tugging at his jersey the other night. They were hugging him, not allowing him to run around screens. But like, you can't pout. You know what I mean? Like you can't let it affect your demeanor. You can't let it affect your body language and stuff like that.
Kenny also said something, I don't remember when it was, the other day maybe before the Indiana game, about like he was, some of Darius's second half slump was maybe natural regression, but there was also this element of, like Kenny was saying, the All-Star game, getting back to the All-Star game was such a big deal for Darius. And then there was like this natural letdown because Kenny literally said, it's not like there's a second All-Star team to make. And it's like, what? What did you just say? First of all, there literally is. It's all NBA, and Darius would have been on it. It's actually a more prestigious honor, and Darius would have been on it if he had even, maintained 70%, 80% of the level that he was playing in the first half. And second, I don't know. That to me, we're talking about maturity. Putting too many eggs, I'm not going to say all of them, but putting too many eggs in the All-Star basket, and then like this idea that, I don't want to put words in Kenny's mouth, but how I heard that was Darius made the All-Star team, and there was a team-wide natural, like at a certain point late in the season, we're going to get the 1 seed, we're cool here, and that's natural. Yeah. That is natural. That, like Kenny said, it's a natural letdown. But like, I think for Darius, it might have hit a little sooner. And I don't love that.
I think LeBron used to call that chill mode toward the end of the season.
That's great for LeBron. That's great for LeBron. That's great for your Kevin Durant or Steph Curry. But it's just like, this, not to sound 60 years old, but like, this team hasn't done anything yet. They have not earned that yet. They've won 60 games. They did what they needed to do. I'm really unbothered by the general trend of them not looking awesome in March and April. But just like the mentality behind that is not what you're looking to see.
And one of the players that Kenny referenced to knowing the feeling of a drop-off, of having a great regular season and then being a number 1 seed and then seeing a drop-off in the playoffs is Donovan Mitchell. And he's already mentioned that Donovan is taking a different approach to getting the best out of these guys, the most mature version of them, because he understands what it feels like to be at the mountaintop for the regular season and then to dwindle in the postseason and how that feels. And he does not want that again. And for those asking, obviously Chris wrote about this for the site, but Donovan Mitchell wasn't 100% participant in practice the last couple of days. And Kenny Atkinson said that he's going to be a full go in scrimmages coming up and the latter portion of this week. So I think it's important to note that even when they're going through walkthroughs, they're going through stations, Donovan Mitchell is holding this team accountable, one, because of where he's been in his past, but also what he believes this team is capable of.
Well, look, I think there's a reality in the NBA, and GMs talk about this and scouts talk about this, and they talk about it more as the playoffs roll around. There are 16-game players and there are 82-game players. Which one are you? We know Donovan's a 16-game player. We've seen that. There's enough evidence of that. Now, Donovan has stuff to prove too, because he's never taken his team, not solely his fault, but he's never taken his team past the second round. He gets it. He knows that. He's got to get to the conference finals. He's got to get to the NBA finals. But there's enough evidence supporting that Donovan Mitchell is a 16-game player. Beyond that, there are questions, right? Legitimate questions. And it doesn't mean that the Cavs can't win a championship. And it doesn't mean that they don't belong as a heavy favorite in the first round. It doesn't mean that they can't compete with the Celtics when that series comes, if that series does come. But we have to be honest about these things. We just don't know. Is Darius Garland an 82-game player or a 16-game player? Shoot, the front office is still trying to figure that out, right? The coaching staff's still trying to figure that out. Is Evan Mobley a 16-game player? Is he an 82-game player? Is Jared Allen a 16-game player or an 82-game player? It's really, really fun because now we're about to see these guys get into an environment with a different level of pressure, different level of expectation. Like, this isn't last year now. This isn't just get out of the first round, get further than you did 2 years ago. This is championship. Not championship or bust, because they still feel like they have a runway and they got all these guys under contract. But they're talking championship. Like, when you're the number 1 seed, 64 games, historically great offense, one of the best seasons in franchise history. Like, there's a different level of expectation. There's a different level of pressure. There's a different level of what's going to be demanded of a lot of these guys. And we're going to get more answers during this playoff run than we have gotten in the previous 2 combined about this team.
For specificity purposes, the series where Kenny Atkinson was an assistant coach alongside the Los Angeles Clippers and Ty Lue in the 2020-2021 year, that was when Donovan Mitchell helped the Utah Jazz win 52 games in the regular season. They will finish as the first seed
out
in
of 72,
NBA
by the
Western
way.
Conference.
So that's like a 61
Out of 72,
pace.
the winning percentage was outrageous.
Correct.
Right.
52-20 was their final record of the regular season. And they lost in the second round, the Western Conference semifinals, to the Los Angeles Clippers in 6 games. And obviously, that Kenny had talked about how Donovan had referenced that. Kenny has also talked about when he was in Atlanta and he had a great season with them and they fell off in the playoffs. Had a historic season franchise-wise when it came to the Atlanta Hawks. So I think it's important that, sure, Kenny Atkinson hasn't taken a team as a head coach past 5 games in a playoff series, but he does have playoff experience, and he also does have the experience of knowing the pain and the suffering that comes with losing in those types of situations, and will do whatever it takes to avoid those situations, learning from each individual case. I think it's important that the Cavs have multiple people, not just players, but coaches. And Damari Carroll is another one of those who we talked about a little bit in today's press conference, who has been in those situations where, sure, there's a lot of losing, you could say, in the organization, but that could build to something bigger. Jimmy, I want you to get into what your thoughts are next.
Can I just say also, first of all, I agree, Donovan stamped playoff performer, right? But there is this thing, like, and it's not always fair, but if you're a guy who leads a franchise to repeated high levels of regular season success, and then that team, for whatever reason, falls flat in the playoffs, like, you can get a little bit of a stink on you too. Yeah. Right? Like, Donovan, I think Donovan, we should not be questioning Donovan as a playoff performer. But, like, there's the general basketball intelligentsia, if the Cavs fall short, like, for whatever reason, they lose the Pacers in round 2 or something, like, that's a big scarlet letter on Donovan's reputation, because the Utah teams, by the end there, were pretty much just written off as no one really cares what you do in the regular season, because between Donovan and Rudy, and I would argue it was more about the players around them than either of them. But for Donovan and Rudy, like, we've seen this movie before. You guys are the face of the franchise. We don't, that team doesn't go very far. We get this. We already had it once with Donovan in the Knicks series, and the Cavs, obviously injuries played a big role last year, but they weren't super competitive against Boston. I would say even like an ugly, quicker than expected exit against Boston, we're having that. We're probably having that conversation as a general basketball public about Donovan after this playoff run. Fair or not? And I would say not.
Tough to argue against that. And he knows that. He does. Like, he's been open and honest about that. I've talked to him about it multiple times. And the other thing that we've talked about on this podcast, reputations are hard to shake. I mean, people are still calling the Cavs soft from what happened 2 years ago when, it was Danny Green and it was Lamar Stevens and it was Jetty Osman and it was guys who either aren't in the NBA currently, no longer on this roster. You know what I'm saying? So like that has followed the Cavs since 2023. So if Donovan
Still can't rebound though. Just saying, can't rebound.
I know it's a legitimate thing. A source told me that they were going heavy on different ways to approach rebounding in the last couple of days.
Another very interesting Kenny comment. He just flat out said Evan Mobley should be a better rebounder.
Yes,
that was telling to me.
I mean, I think that's him challenging him. I think Kenny has learned throughout the course of this year, okay, what things can I say that are going to get through to a guy? Like Johnny Bryant knows how to get through to Donovan Mitchell in a different kind of way. It feels like Kenny Atkinson seems to believe that the way to get through to Evan is to tell him he can't do something or challenge him to do something that he's not doing well enough, because Evan is a perfectionist. He's a natural born perfectionist. Like he wants to master the piano. He wants to master the Rubik's Cube. Everything that he does, he wants to be the best at. So I think Kenny did that purposely. And they have been, I would say for the last week and a half, really, really focused, from what I understand, on rebounding and changing the positional spacing, the floor balance, the approach to gang rebounding, the approach to crashing. Like there are a lot of things that they're doing from a technical standpoint and from a certain kind of technique that they're trying, because they did something different when it came to their offensive rebounding in terms of technique and in terms of the way that they approached it. And it led to them being a good offensive rebounding team. But now they're trying to find, okay, what's the right way to kind of mask some of the deficiencies that we're going to have when it comes to defensive rebounding. So it is a point of emphasis. And I thought that was pretty telling that he brought that up when it comes to Evan. And, he'll probably bring it up when it comes to Jared Allen too, because those two guys, they're not solely responsible for it, but they're just going to have to take it to a different kind of level, like a Zubac type level. And they just, over the last 15 games, they're one of the worst teams in the NBA in defensive rebound percentage. What was the old quote? No rebounds, no rings.
Yeah. And I think it's important because obviously Kenny Atkinson also challenged both of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley to be more vocal, but also just to be the overall leaders of the defensive end. And obviously you can't end a defensive possession without getting a defensive rebound. So I think that's very important and very telling. And Jared Allen also mentioned that he quoted Tristan Thompson. He said, what's the saying? Just go get it. Like there should be no thought. There should be no thought about it. Get physical, hit first, go up and grab a board. And sure, if it was that easy, maybe it is for Tristan Thompson. He grabbed 20 rebounds in like one of the main games that he's played all year. But I think this team knows what its areas of deficiencies are, right? And I think that's extremely important and helpful as they prepare. And Chris, I think you probably know this better than me, but they haven't practiced like a ton over the entire season. Kenny Atkinson was talking about how different it was from the practice schedule when they had broke it down from the beginning of the season to the recovery schedule. And now they have an entire week, not only to rest and recover, but also to break down film and just get into the nitty gritty of what they want to work on.
They had 3 practices in the final 46 days of the regular season, 3 total, because they thought that was best to manage the guys' bodies, keep them off their legs, not overexert them. And look, I think the one thing that you can say is that their number one priority was reached in the regular season. And it wasn't getting the number 1 seed, and it wasn't getting home court advantage. It was be healthy going into the playoffs, be at full strength, be in the best physical and mental condition possible going into the playoffs. And they are. And, Evan Mobley talked about it. Jared Allen talked about it. Kenny Atkinson talked about it. This is just a different, it's just a different feeling around this team because they're at full strength. And there is a belief around this organization, whether it's executives, coaches, players, that if they're at full strength and they get a shot to give whatever opponent it is their best shot, the kind of shot that they haven't been able to give, like they're going to have a fighting chance against anybody.
All right, and I want to take this time to switch over and get into our subtext questions. I don't know, but I feel like reading our YouTube comments and our podcast comments, that people are going to take the first half of this podcast to have been negative, to have been tearing the Cavs down and poking at their flaws. But here's a subtext question that I think will be able to go in the opposite direction. Dave in PA says, I'm nervous about the Cavs and every one of the play-in teams. I know this is insane. Could you give us, irrationally worried fans, a reality check / pep talk? Chris, the floor is yours.
I mean, it just starts with the Cavs are significantly better than whoever they're going to play in the first round. 64-18 is not a fluke. One of the best offenses in NBA history is not a fluke. Top 10 defense, despite some of the slippage and despite some of the flaws, that's not a fluke. Like teams like Miami, teams like Atlanta, they're not beating this version of the Cavs so complete, so deep, so star heavy, so versatile, so diverse on the offensive end of the floor. It's just not happening. I don't think there's any reason for trepidation because the Cavs are significantly better than whoever they're going to see in round one, whether it's the Hawks or it's the Miami Heat. There's a reason why those two teams are in the play-in tournament, fighting for their lives just to get in the playoffs, and the Cavs are sitting in the 1 seed. They're a great coach team. They believe in each other. They believe in this system. No team has consistently found an answer to slow them down on the offensive end of the floor because they've got so many weapons. They've got so much firepower. There's so much diversity within the way that they attack. Like, look, if this was the predictable offense of last year where, okay, things go bad, let's just go high pick and roll. Everybody know, like, there just isn't the same limitations with this roster makeup, and the way that this team plays, the way that there have been in the past, that I think, whoever it was in the past could find those weaknesses, and there were many, and they could expose them. There just aren't as many exposable weaknesses when it comes to this Cavs team until you get to a better opponent. And Miami and Atlanta don't qualify as that.
Jimmy, anything to add here?
Yeah, I mean, let's just set aside the fact that the Cavs are the best offense in the league, a top 10 defense, one of the best three-point shooting teams, a top 5 assist-to-turnover ratio team. You get the point. They're very good at a lot of things. Whoever it is, whether it's the Hawks or the Heat, are going to be by far the worst team that the Cavs have played in the playoffs this iteration. By far. I understand if fans have some playoff scars from watching the Cavs in the last 2 years. Although I will tell you, as much as we want to have are they physical enough conversation, it's always been about their playoff offense. Their playoff offense cratered against Orlando. Their playoff offense cratered against the Knicks. It was a bigger problem that they couldn't score against the Knicks. They still had the best defense in the playoffs during that matchup. It's been 2 years now, but the best defense in the playoffs during that series. They just couldn't frickin' score, so they got played off the court, okay? And maybe you want to say part of that is related to physicality and the way they didn't handle it. That's fine. I'm willing to hear the argument. But it's just like, again, put aside the fact that the Cavs are now the best offense in the NBA. And by the way, amid all of these weird late season, no, they're still the best. They're still the best. Almost wire to wire. Maybe they did dip at some point, but basically the best offense from tip until the end of the season. Put that aside. Atlanta's mid, man. Like, they're supposed to be a good offensive team. They're like 14th or 17th or something in offense. They've never really been that good of a defensive team because Trae Young is the center of their franchise. I was telling Chris in the media room today, I came up with a great name for Trae Young. and LaMelo Ball, they are both circus players because they do fun little tricks. Your kids might like seeing them, but one day you grow up and you realize, man, these skills aren't that useful. They are circus players. Circus players. I'm proud of that one. The Miami Heat.
The other thing, I mean, I think people
Yeah,
have to
you don't need to hear about my Miami Heat take. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that people have to understand is that, like, the Cavs aren't going 4-4-4-4 here, right? So there are going to be moments throughout the course of a game, maybe even game one, where they're tested and their nerves, and maybe there's tension inside the arena. That's playoff basketball. LeBron's teams lost. Now, some of those, they didn't really take Toronto seriously or whatever, but, like, LeBron's teams lost. The Heatles lost games in series. The dynastic Golden State Warriors, when they were just becoming a dynasty, coming off a 67-win campaign, like, they lost, or they were tested, or they didn't blow out every single opponent, because that's playoff basketball, and that's going to happen. But playoff basketball requires any team playing against the Cavs to beat them 4 times in 7 tries. And there's only a small number of teams that I think are capable of doing that. So maybe Miami gets a game. If it's Atlanta, maybe Atlanta gets a game. But that doesn't matter because they have to do it 4 times in 7 tries. And the Cavs have shown a level of consistency. They've shown a level of adaptability that I just think it's really, really difficult to beat this team once, let alone 4 times in 7 tries.
Jimmy, I'm going to circle back, so now you can give your Miami Heat take if you so choose.
People are waiting with bated breath. I would just say the Heat offense, when Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo aren't playing like all-stars, is an atrocity.
Yeah.
And their defense is pretty good. I'll give you that. I think they're a top 10 defense. The one weakness that the Cavs have really is defensive rebounding. The Heat are 27th in offensive rebound. Like, it's just, there's no hole to poke, really. It's going to be fine. I promise it's going to be fine. The Cavs are going to win they're going to win either series in commanding fashion. Nothing to worry about.
I mean, if we go back to 2 years ago, like, there was a clear kind of style that was going to bother that version of the Cavs. And that's the team that they matched up with in round 1. So I think everybody knew going into that playoff run that the Knicks were a horrible matchup for the Cavs for a variety of reasons. They had a bench edge. They had a toughness, physicality advantage. The Cavs were low in defensive rebounding percentage, and they were playing against a top 5 offensive rebounding team. So it's like the things that the Cavs did poorly, the Knicks did well. And it was like, like, that's the team that can exploit those things. And then if you go into last year, yeah, the Cavs had a talent advantage, but there were things that you saw with the Magic that you were thinking, they're big, they're long, they're athletic. They can play multiple bigs just like the Cavs can, or they can thrive on defense with just one of the bigs just like the Cavs can. So there were like some stylistic wonkiness things within that series against Orlando that you thought, okay, that could be problematic for the Cavs in that particular matchup. And it's just like, it doesn't feel like those components exist to the same level with these Cavs beyond, the obvious one, which is defensive rebounding, which has been a problem for them over the last 15 games.
All right, so I'm going to go into the last question that we have for today's podcast from our subtexters, but it basically gets into the opposite of what we have been talking about so far, right? All of us have said that if they play the Heat, if they play the Atlanta Hawks, it's likely going to be a 5-game series maximum, right? This subtexter, Evan in Lyndhurst, asked, would the Cavs benefit from a longer first-round series? You discussed how they haven't looked to be playing at their best for months. Their best win of the season involved them going down 20. They may need to find the best versions of themselves before playing Boston. I see Jimmy making a face already, so we will start there.
First round's about getting their mojo back, okay? The Cavs are the best team in the East on paper. They have played best. They have played like the best team on the East for most of the season. The first round is about proving that, and there is no universe where having the Heat or Hawks drag you into a long series ends with the Cavs feeling that way, okay?
Right.
This is supposed to be an extent. Honestly, this should be an extension of the good part of the regular season, like the first 65 games or so, when the Cavs were like 50, maybe 66, when they were that 56-10 mark, when the vibes were as good as they possibly could have been, that second 15-game winning streak. That's what we're looking to recreate here. Making a bunch of threes. Kenny's playing 11 guys in the playoffs and saying, see, I told you we could do it. We're just this deep. And the vibes have never been better. It's about getting, this is, because again, I do have a healthy respect for the Pacers and or Bucks if they beat the Pacers, especially given that we have the news today that Dame has not been cleared to play from the blood clot, but he has been cleared of the blood clot, and he's going to start ramping up here pretty soon. This is the last chance that the Cavs are going to have to play the give you confidence game, right? This is Kenny's. This series is where Kenny can press all the buttons and invest that last bit of goodwill into some of these guys who aren't going to play as much in the later series. And again, that's not going to happen if these are tight games in the fourth quarter. So I really just don't see any benefit towards any of these series. I sort of get the spirit of what Evan is saying. Like maybe it's a wake-up call, or maybe, the Cavs need to get themselves out of a hole so before they can get back to where they need. But no, you just need to come out. You just need to prove to us that the last month and a half was the blip that we all think it is, and start throwing knockout punches against some of these clearly less talented teams.
Chris, you look satisfied with that answer.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to add other than the longer a series goes, the more risk is attached to it.
100%.
The more these guys wear down, the more there's a risk of injury, the more physicality picks up throughout the course of a series because these teams start hating each other. So you want to try and get these things over as quick as possible, get these guys off their feet, get them some more opportunity to rest and recover. And the last thing that you want to do is have to play, just to get out of the first round against the 8th seed in the freaking Eastern Conference. The last thing that you want to feel like you have to do is play Donovan Mitchell like 40 minutes for that to be the case, or play Evan Mobley 40 minutes for that to be the case, or whatever situation you feel like presents itself. You don't want to run into that where, maybe these guys are feeling it by the time you get to the conference finals, or maybe they're not feeling as healthy as they were going into the playoffs because the physicality of the Miami Heat kind of wore on them as that series went on. So just avoid that at all costs and get it over with quickly. They'll probably lose one in Miami because it's Miami. And, there's a tendency when you're playing against a prideful team with a great coach and all those different things. Miami's got Tiger blood and they've got the Heat culture. If it is Miami, one of those could certainly go the way of Miami, but, get it over with as quickly as possible and just eliminate some of the variables that could pop up throughout the course of a series.
You want to talk maturity? If the Cavs go 6 games with the Heat or the Hawks, we're going to have a different maturity conversation at the end of that series.
That wouldn't be great. I don't think it's going to happen, but that wouldn't be great.
Yep, and Chris, that's exactly why I said if Miami plays against the Cavs, that I have them going 5, and then if they play the Hawks, I have a clean sweep. But I think the other thing when it comes to Miami and Trae Young in this case, you don't want to give a team that has already had to fight its way into the playoffs any sort of confidence. I don't think it will matter for the Cavs per se because of how much better they are than the opponent that they're going to face in the first round. But I don't think it's smart to give a team that is not nothing to lose, but is already fighting through this gauntlet any sort of confidence when it comes to just a win or a longer extended series against a team that is supposedly and clearly better than them in every capacity. And I don't think I have to mince words when I say that.
I think the other thing that stands out to me about this version of the Cavs is, we were just having a conversation about the readiness and the basketball maturity of Darius Garland and even Evan Mobley to a degree. And there are some other guys too that are very, very young and inexperienced. But the beauty of these Cavs, they do need Darius to be great to win a championship. And they need Evan to be great to win a championship. But let's say that Darius is in foul trouble. Let's say that, Darius is not handling the physicality very, very well. And Kenny's got to go away from him to kind of get him re-engaged and have a conversation with him. Well, guess who they're going to? Ty Jerome, who might be in the running. He is in the running for Sixth Man of the Year, might get some first place votes for Sixth Man of the Year. What a luxury that is for Kenny to be able to go to. And Ty's not Darius. They're not the same kind of player. But you just don't feel like that would be crippling to a team's chances. If you think about last year and some of the guys that JB was forced to go to, I mean, come on. What? There were just no options. You felt like it was such a significant difference between who you were running big minutes to and then those other guys toward the end of the bench. Kenny's ability to empower these guys throughout the course of the year and build up their confidence and make them feel a part of it and make them feel valued and make it so that they weren't looking over their shoulder if they missed a shot or if they committed a turnover or something like that. Ty's going to be ready. You feel like Ty is going to be ready for the moment, right? You feel like DeAndre Hunter is going to be ready for the moment if things aren't going well for Max Strus. So it's there were certain guys that the Cavs were relying on to a high, high level during last year's playoff run. And if those guys, don't have it for one night or for one half or for one quarter or something like that, you have other capable, reliable options that you can go to just to see what those guys give you. And if those guys don't give you anything, all right, then you go back to the other guy and say, all right, see if you can pick it up and turn things around. And not every team is in the same kind of position as the Cavs are from that standpoint. If Jalen Brunson is in foul trouble, New York goes to campaign.
He's left-handed.
Cat is in foul trouble.
Deuce McBride.
It's just different. And the Cavs were in that situation 2 years ago where it's oh my God, who do I go to? Are you serious? Who's even playable here in this situation? And they were sort of in that situation last year. Oh my God, are we going to Marcus Morris and playing him 30 minutes? Is that what we're doing now? If we're going to go away from the two big lineup, if we're going to go away from whatever look it is that we think is valuable to a different look, that's what we're going to. So it's a different situation that the Cavs are in because of the depth and because of the way that they handled everything throughout the course of the regular season.
Alrighty, Jimmy, I'll open the floor up again for you just to have a take to end the podcast. But if not, that'll do it.
I was just thinking about Ty Jerome and Ty Jerome's such a, in my view, Ty Jerome is such a self-made success story. The stick-to-itiveness, the skill work, the Chris wrote a good story about Ty Jerome on cleveland.com today. That's probably part of the reason I'm thinking about this. But the stick-to-itiveness, the skill work, the work that he did on his body to prepare himself for the grind, right? But you need opportunity as well. And I think that's one of the stories of this season is that as much as it did seem like last year, JB was thin on options. Sam Merrill was there, and he is a different guy this year. And we've had the conversation a couple times on the pod this year, well, JB didn't have Ty Jerome. Fair, he didn't. Even if he did, though, would he have used him? And would Ty Jerome have looked like this? Would he have had the kind of rope required for the Cavs to even discover that this was in there? Right. Do we? If JB Bickerstaff is coaching the Cavs, and there's some kid tearing it up, some end of roster guy tearing it up during September Open Gym. Does that guy get extended the opportunity? It's an open. Maybe he does. But I don't know.
So, one, I think that's a great point because it's one that we've made a lot on this podcast. But the other thing about it is we saw it when Ty Jerome got the matchup with J.B. Bickerstaff in their first meeting, right? Like he gave him a little celebration before the freeze celebration.
There's something
became
there.
Viral.
There's something there for sure.
There's 100% something.
Oh, God,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, like there's something there to the point where like he was like, "Oh, I had something for him." You played 2 games. Yeah. Why would you have something for him? Like I don't we don't get to see everything behind the scenes. And obviously, Chris put out a great article on Ty Jerome, how he got to bring his life from darkness into a beacon of light. I love that from Chris today. You go check that out on cleveland.com/Cavs. But I do think there was a tension from last year that is completely removed. Max Strus, tension with J.U. Bickerstaff. Ty Jerome, tension with J.U. Bickerstaff. Donovan Mitchell, tension with J.U. Bickerstaff. So, and I know there were people that were questioning how Kenny Atkinson was going to be able to mix and match on these, manage the emotions, manage the players, all these things. He's still learning, but there's a different freedom, and we've said this word. I feel like that's been now the buzzword of this podcast. There's been a different freedom for every player down the roster, dating back to Ty Jerome when he just got back and he was like, "Oh, I didn't know I was going to get this Ty Jerome, but now that he's here, I can't take him off the floor." That's different than what J.U. Bickerstaff might have done. He would have said, "Oh, wow, you're playing well. Sam Merrill, you're playing well. Sorry. Still going to throw Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell back out there. You're not getting minutes. Max Strus is going to get minutes. You're not playing the 3 as much as you played the 3 this year." So, again, this team, the construction of this team, how it's been reconstructed, how it's been used is completely different from last year. So I know, sure, you can look back to 2 years ago against the Knicks. Everybody might want to still say that they haven't proven anything. You can still say that you look back to last year against the Boston Celtics. They were injured. They didn't have a lot of things going for them. They weren't the same offensive team as this year. Sure, all of these things are true. But the fact of the matter is, if this team can have a small version of the success that they did in the regular season, they will look completely different from those 2 teams over the past 2 seasons.
I think you feel that from the players, and I've written about this and I've talked about this. It goes back to belief. Like, you have to believe that the guy that's walking your sidelines is going to push the right buttons at the right time. He's going to care about the important things. He's going to find solutions as games are going on. He's going to make the adjustments quickly. He's going to do the things that he needs to do to put each individual player in the best position to maximize his skill set, and it's going to be the best thing for the team. And from the very beginning of this season all the way to now, there has just been a different belief level in Kenny Atkinson as the tactician. One of the players said it right from the opening tip, basically. Kenny Atkinson is a problem solver, not a problem announcer. And it's like a lot of coaches in the NBA can identify what's going wrong, right? You can turn on the tape and you can point out the flaws, but what are the ways that you're coming up with to fix those things and fix those things quickly? That it's not going to compromise other areas of the team. You know what I mean? And it's just, Max Strus said it at the very end of Game 5 last year in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Like, we're too good to be losing like this. Like, we have too much talent in this locker room to lose like this. Even though we didn't have Donovan, even though we didn't have Karras, even though we didn't have Jarrett, like, we should have been more competitive with Boston. And that was him saying our coaching staff should have given us more of a fighting chance. Our coaching staff should have game planned better. Our coaching staff should have found solutions. Now, maybe there weren't any against Boston, but you didn't believe that at the time, right? That was everybody shouting from the rooftops, like, we need somebody else that we're going to believe in to a different level. And you sense that belief from this group in Kenny Atkinson.
Chris, we have enough. We have enough, Chris. Max Strus, we have
right.
enough. That's what he was screaming. Like, I could not count the amount of times, every time somebody asked, like, Max Strus a question, what needs to be different? Oh, no, we have enough. We have enough. We have enough. And I'm like, I'm sitting there in the locker room. I'm like, dude, so what's the difference? And now we're seeing it. But, Jimmy, go ahead, and we'll end the podcast with you.
I was just going to say, I got asked about this on the radio today. What questions do you have about Kenny in the playoffs? Sure, clap for me.
I was asked the same question.
There you go.
Probably from the same host.
Chris was after you by an hour.
Questions, radio hosts.
That's right.
Kenny Atkinson diversified the offense, made it less predictable. Yeah. Let's go.
On my list of concerns with the Cavs, Kenny's pretty low on it. Honestly, I've seen plenty. He's revamped the offense. He's proven that he knows how to get to the guys. He's gotten the best out of Evan Mobley. Like, he's already checked off the boxes that I think he needed to check off. He's given these guys the tools, and that's all a coach can do. To what Chris was saying about Max, last year it was clear they weren't getting the tools. I think this year it's clear they have the tools. This is a players' conversation. We can adjust that as we see fit over the course of the playoffs, but I have a feeling that Kenny knows what buttons he needs to push, and there will be problems that arise. We know that there's going to be DeAndre Hunter versus Jared Allen closing questions. We know that there could be some tough Darius Garland conversations that need to have. But I think Kenny's prepared for all that stuff because I think he's seen bits and pieces of it throughout the season, and we've seen him manage bits and pieces of it throughout the season. I think he's going to be totally fine. It's a player's conversation for me.
It's not a situation where you take everything that somebody says, whether it's in a press conference, a group setting, a scrum, and you say, okay, that's gospel, right? But I think something that Kenny said today was pretty important, and it kind of told me where he's at as a coach and where this team is at. And he was talking about not changing things. And he was talking about trying not to do too much. And I think that just shows his own maturity as a coach. And I think he understands the kind of team that he has. We talked about this a little bit on the podcast. We wrote about this too. When the Cavs were going through their bad stretch on the West Coast trip, he had them play horse. If that's JB Bickerstaff, and this is just an example that I'm bringing up, if that's JB Bickerstaff, they're having a 2-hour film session, they're running, and they're doing a hard practice because he felt like he needed to send a message to his guys because there was slippage, or whatever the case may be. Another coach, even if it wasn't JB, it could have been another coach. They probably don't have horse. They probably have a really rigid practice and tries to send a message. But I think he understands the kind of team that he has and what they need from him. And it's about managing those personalities. It's about managing those egos. It's about managing people. And I think for him to come into this and say, yeah, it is my first playoffs here in Cleveland. And, there is a tendency to kind of go overboard and step forward a little bit more as a coach and not delegate as much. But he has stayed true to himself, with the exception of the stubble that he's rocking right now that he came to practice with. He's the same guy. He's staying true to himself. He's staying true to what has made this team the team that it is. And I think players see right through it when you make drastic changes. If Kenny makes a drastic change just because the playoffs are here, think about that messaging from the coach of the number one team in the Eastern Conference. And I talked about this on a previous podcast. If Kenny comes out in game 1 and he goes to DeAndre Hunter in the starting lineup instead of Max Strus, think about the messaging that he is sending to the number one team in the Eastern Conference, the 64-win Cavs. And I think the way that he talked today and the way that he handled practice, I think it showed a lot of maturity, and I think it shows that he's got a really, really good grasp on what this team needs from him as a people manager.
Accountability is huge, right? Accountability in this league especially as a coach, right? You're not only holding your players accountable, but you're holding yourself accountable. Looking back to your past and even not even looking back that far earlier this season, saying that he overmanaged the game because he wanted to get a win against a particular team. We know that
it was
team
against Boston.
The Boston Celtics, right?
I mean, he didn't want to come out and say it was against Boston. He overprepared for Boston. They changed their routine at shoot around. He treated that game as if it was a bigger game, and it was a bigger game. But you don't want to send those kinds of messages. You want to stay true to yourself and to the routines that you've built and the habits that you've built. And all of a sudden you start changing things and players are like, whoa,
right,
what's going on here? That's different.
And back to the accountability thing, right? Because Kenny is holding himself accountable, holding his players accountable, but he's also holding the other coaches accountable. This entire season, we've seen him delegate. We've seen him give them assignments. And apparently, as he told us in a recent press conference, he has given different teams that were potential for the playoffs to each of his coaches to be studied up on them throughout the regular season, right? It's something that he has had assigned that not necessarily he's had looked at, but he is trusted in these guys to have studied up and to know these things going into the playoffs. So they are already prepared partially for these teams before they even get there, before they even find out who they're playing in the first round, right? And I think that's extremely important in having guys like we mentioned, DeMarre Carroll on the roster, who was a former player and is recently removed from being a player, having him on the roster and figuring out what he would want to have done for him as a player rather than a coach is also helpful for Kenny Atkinson. And I think it's important to see how it's not like he's using the depth of his roster, just the players. He's using the depth of his roster in the coaching staff, where there's different guys that have player development coaches. And Chris, you mentioned it earlier, Johnny Bryant can tap into Donovan Mitchell differently, right? DeMarre Carroll can tap into Jalen Tyson differently because that's one of his guys, right? And Kenny Atkinson is more of an Evan Mobley, Jared Allen guy, trying to get into the guys who he has coached before or he knows how to push their buttons. So I think overall, this is a team that is going into the first round of the playoff still unknowing who they're going to play, but they're already prepared for whoever is going to be put in front of them. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. If you want to get a small shout out on the podcast and have your questions answered, this is the place to be. Get your voice heard and join the Cavs community. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.